Hello and welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about creating a typeface using modular letter forms in Illustrator. My name is Philippa. I'm using Illustrator CS6 on a Mac. So I'm going to show you some examples of what we're going to be looking at making. Here are 4 typefaces. You may have them installed on your machines already. And what I'm going to show you is examples of how you can think of these typefaces as being composed of modular parts. So I'm going to zoom in here on Century Gothic, and I've created another layer. And what I've done here is, in the blue across here, I've looked at the letter shapes and I've pulled out all the ones which are using the circular shape, the counter or the bowl. So you can see the C's, the E's, G's, O's, etc. The next line here on the pink line, what I'm looking for is shapes that have this shoulder where the curve is coming off a straight vertical line, so we see it there. We've got sort of a similar shape here. We've got part of it in the R and again in the H. And then down here I've got a collection of shapes, so we've got some odd ones out. We've got ones with little crossbars, ones with diagonals, and ones with the dots. Having a look at another typeface, Braggadocio, we can see we've got the vertical parts here in blue, we've got the semicircular parts here in pink, and then we've got the circular dots here in yellow, and we can see that these elements are repeated again and again. Moving across here, looking at marker felt, we've got the strong verticals happening here. So this one's got only a few shapes. We can see the element is repeated again and again. It's very similar. And in amongst there we've also got this sort of diagonal element which is repeated again and again. And then the counter, the rounded shape, which we see here in the A and the E. And it will be in letters like the G and the O as well. And moving up here to something with a serif style. Once again we've got the vertical stems happening here. We've got the more circular shapes of the counters, and you can see they vary from letter to letter, and some of them the shape is quite similar between letters, and others here the difference between the D and the O is quite striking. And then down here again looking at instances where the circular form butts onto the vertical stem and you have this shoulder happening here. So that's looking at 4 different typefaces: a sans serif, a serif, quite a strong block shape here, and a handwritten style. So you can use this for different styles of typeface. First thing we want to do is look at what type of shapes you need. So I've made some layers here. Okay, so if we write out the alphabet, and I've just written that out in Myriad Pro, it's the default font on my machine, and we're going to look at the parts of the letter forms. So the most basic one that you'll normally start with is the vertical stem, and I've copied down all the letters here which include that vertical stem. So this is in Myriad Pro. We can see it here and here and here, for instance. Looking at the next shape, we have the circular bowl, and we can see the letters that include that style of shape. There's some variation there, like obviously the O is going to be the odd one out, but the C and the E have similarities to it. The next shape I'm looking at is letters where the circular bowl butts onto the vertical stem, so it forms this shoulder function. And you'll often find that that shoulder there in the H is repeated again in the M and the N, and sometimes the R, and like an N maybe similar to the U but upside down. The diagonal shape, just go across this way a bit. So the diagonal line occurring in the K, the V, W, X, Y and Z. The horizontal crossbeam coming across this way in the E and the F, the T, and sometimes in the Z. And we've got other elements here. So we've got like the little curves at the top of the F, You may look at the style of descenders. The S is always going to be an odd one out. It's the only character of its shape. Another curve at the bottom there, another descender there, and I've put the Z in here in the other elements just because it is quite different to the other shapes. In fact, it has some similarities with the S just because it is so different. So what does that all mean? Well, there's a set of basic shapes that we can create: the vertical stem, the circular bowl, the shoulder, the diagonal, the crossbeam, and some of those other elements, and that should allow us to create an alphabet. And here they are, simplified down, so I'll just pop that away. Here's the vertical stem, here's the crossbeam, one of the other elements, some part of a shoulder, the circular bowl, and a diagonal. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts that you'd need to create, and you can have yourself a nice little modular typeface. Now, of course, these are just some basic shapes. Your shapes may vary, as I say down here. Your typeface may vary. You may need some other modular components. That's fine. So I've taken them across here to another file, and what I've done here is I've set up some guides. So this is just an A4 page, and I've turned the rulers on. If you want to turn the rulers on, you can press Control R or Command R, and it will turn the rulers on and off. I then started off by just dragging out some guidelines like this. So if you drag one down and drop it, you'll get a new guideline. So I'm just going to undo that. What I've done is I've set up 4 guidelines here, 4 horizontal guidelines. So the first one, where all the letters sit, this is on the baseline. I then just picked, it was completely random, completely by chance, this height. I picked an X height, and that's going to be the height of the main body of my letters. I've then drawn another one for the ascender. I'm only looking at lowercase letters today, and another one for the descender. And you can see I've created my shapes here. So how did I make those shapes? Well, I'll show you. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select them, and I'm just going to drag them down. I'm holding Shift as I drag, and I'm just going to drop them down there. So I can have them as a reference, but I'll draw them again. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So I'm holding Command and Space as I click and drag. Now the first one I'm going to do is this vertical stem. I'm going to use the rectangular tool, and I'm just working with a plain black fill and no stroke. So to start off with, we need to figure out where this rectangle needs to go. It needs to go from the ascender down to the baseline, so I'm just going to draw that. If it's not in the right place, I can just hold Space and move it. So that top line, there we go, snaps, and so it comes down to the baseline. So because I'm redrawing this, I'm not going to get exactly the same result as these, but that's okay. I am actually going to make this narrower, make a narrower version. So there we go, that will be my lowercase l, for instance. It may also function as the lowercase t, and it may be used in the D and the B. I'm going to then make this piece here. Now this is like a shortened stem, and it's the height of the X height. So to get that, I'm going to want to retain the same width. So I'm actually going to click and drag, and then hold Alt, and then I'm going to hold Shift. So Alt, that makes the little double arrow. Now, Alt on and off. With the double arrow on, I'm making a copy. With Shift on and off, I'm keeping it constrained to the horizontal. I'll just let that go. And the next thing I need to do is make it shorter. So I'm just going to select it and pull it down by the top arrow. And there we go. It's now the height of the X height. So that's basically the height of the lowercase x. I haven't drawn an X yet. I don't have enough character shapes yet to draw my X, but I can draw the lowercase I. Same difference, it's got a flat bottom and a flat top. Now the next shape is a little bit different. This is, you could use it for a lowercase n or the lowercase h, etc. But getting one of these shapes to bend is quite difficult. If I try and bend it, we just end up rotating it, which is quite useless. To get the same width here. That's the tricky part. And to make sure that the curve on the outside is nicely matched to the curve on the inside. So what I'm going to use instead of a path like this, I'm actually going to use a stroke with a certain weight to it. I'm going to zoom in a bit here, and I'm going to get my line tool, and I'm just going to draw a line. It doesn't quite matter how long it is, because you're just going to use this to work it out. You can see my line has no fill and no stroke, so I'm just going to bring the stroke to the front and apply a black stroke to it. Actually, I might change the colour just so I can see it, make it pink. Things always end up pink in my videos for some reason. Okay, so I've got the stroke here, and we can see that it is in front of that black rectangle. I'm going to select both of them just by clicking and dragging over, and then I want to come up to the contextual menu and choose horizontal align center. If you don't have the contextual menu up, or you don't know how to get the align tools, you can go to Window, Align, and this will give you the align palette. If the align palette is not fully open, you can just click here to open it up, and just check that it does say align to selection. Mine actually says align to artboard, so I'll just change it to align to selection and then click on center, and you can see these two objects are now centered. I'll click off to deselect them, and I'm just going to grab that top one there and open my stroke palette. In here we've got the weight, and if I click up on that, we can see it's getting thicker. Keep going. What I want to do is match the thickness of this pink line with the width of the black rectangle underneath. There we go, that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to test that out by sending this one to the back. So you can either select it and right click or control click and go arrange center back. I do recommend you get familiar with these keyboard shortcuts. They do look scary to learn, but try them out. That's Shift, Apple, and that's the square bracket. The square brackets are located above your Enter or Return key. That's a very handy thing to learn. So that looks about the same width. I just want to check, I just want to remove this guideline. So you can temporarily turn off the guides. You hold down Command and press semicolon. I'm just going to zoom in a bit. So that looks pretty good. If you've got like a something like this happening, if that's on 24 point, if you've got something like this happening or something like that happening, then you've got a problem. The thickness is not the same, so try and match it up. If you're sort of part way there and it's, you know, you go one up and it's too far and one down and it's not enough, you can actually type in here, so you can put like 0.5 in there if you just need a little bit of a nudge. So that's a helpful tip. And I'm going to turn my guides back on, Command semicolon, just to toggle them back on. So the shape I want to make is this kind of N shape here. I'm going to use my pen tool for that. So I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to start by clicking here, single click, and I'm going to hold shift because I want the next point to be directly above that bottom point. It doesn't matter how high up because we can alter that later. But holding shift, click and drag, and I'm pulling in the direction of up. Doesn't matter how far I pull that, doesn't matter. I'm going to move out sort of in a 45-degree angle from that last point, not from the handle but from the point. I'm going to click and drag and pull to the right. I'm holding shift, and one last time holding shift, click down the bottom. So this gives me a very wonky shape. I'm going to move this line out of the way. You go and sit over there. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is with my direct selection tool, the white arrow tool, this one here. I'm using this one because I want to select something small. In this case I want to select the small point. So if I wanted to select the whole shape I could use the black arrow tool, but I'm after the detail down here. And why strain my eyes when I can zoom in? So I want to make sure that these 2 points are at the same level as the bottom of this. So I'm going to hold shift and mouse over that bottom point, selected as well. So I've got that point, this second point, and that third point all lined up. You'll see that it's changed to align to key anchor point, and I want to align the bottom, so now they're all down. Just go in and check that seems to be still straight. Now you can do a lot of things to alter this shape before you move on. This is quite narrow, and these are not very well aligned yet. So what I'm going to do is select these two, this one, and do the same thing, just go align to bottom. So now these two here are at the same vertical height. The last thing I want to do is make sure that this one here is directly in the center between these two. So I could grab this one, hold shift and grab that one, and grab this one. And if I try and align the horizontal, try and do the horizontal distribute space, yes, we get some interesting things happening. So that's not going to work. I'm just going to use Command Z, undo. I'm going to do a slightly slower route to get these 3 points centered. You may know a way to get them centered. If you do, let me know in the comments, please. So I'm going to move that one to the right a little bit, just tapping on the keyboard, just so that we can make this completely obvious what I'm doing. I'm going to get my line tool. The keyboard shortcut is the backslash, and I'm going to draw 3 lines. So there's my first line, and we can see we've still got the attributes of the previously drawn line. I don't want that, so I'm going to change it to a different colour and change the stroke just to 2 points. That's all I need, just something thinner. And I need 3 lines, one for the left, one for the middle, and one for the right. So I'm selecting them, holding shift and holding alt. Now this one on the left, I'll select that, and holding shift I will select the pink sort of upside down U shape, and I want to align to the left. So now this line is perfectly aligned with the path under here, not to the edge here because it's the edge of the stroke, but actually to that little path there. Repeat on the right, select those 2 things, this time align to the right. Make sure you've deselected them all and just grab the 3 lines, the 3 vertical lines, and now you can do the distribute spacing on those. Now if I zoom in here using my white arrow tool, there we go, there's the point, and this is where it needs to be. So I'm going to move it across to the left. You can use the keys on the keyboard if you want, or you can grab it and hold shift and just drag it. That'll drag it left or right. And I'm just going to manually put it right there in the middle. So it does look wonky, and that is probably because we've got more tension on this left vertical handle than we do on the one on the right. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is actually delete off these vertical lines, and I'm going to grab again the white arrow tool, and I will actually zoom up a bit there. So what I need to do is make the lengths of these handles here on the left and the handles here on the right, you can see the ones on the right are much shorter. I need to make them the same height. For that I'm actually going to use a guideline. I think the curve on the right is much nicer, so I'm actually going to pull the guideline down. I only need 1 because I'm going to use handles that are equi-length. So with this selected, I'm going to push P to get my pen tool. I'm going to hold Alt to get the convert anchor point tool, and I'm going to click and click and drag. You can see when I do that they pull the handles out. So just make sure you don't have it flipped around. You don't want that happening. You want it dragging in the direction of the line. I'm going to hold shift as well, so when I do that it pops it to perfectly vertical. I'm just going to pull it until that top handle touches the guideline and then drop. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, except I'm going to pull in the other direction. So instead of pulling down, this time I'm going to need to pull up. Hold shift, pull up till the handle touches that line and drop. So now I should have a almost perfectly symmetrical curve, which is what I'm after. You may not want a symmetrical curve, that's absolutely fine. So I do need to get rid of that guideline. You can see that for me it's locked. I'm just going to control click or right click to bring up the menu, untick lock guides. I can select the guide, push delete, and then I'm going to lock my guides again. So you can see already that I'm going to come up with a completely different shape typeface from the one below. Now you may be looking at this and saying, Philippa, it's too tall, it's going above the X height. Well, you're right, it is too tall, but only by a little smidge. To move it down, it's very tempting just to grab the black arrow tool, select it, and then just do this. You can see what happens when you do that. You squish the shape. It's not happy, it's distorted it. So I'm just going to Command Z to undo. And instead of distorting the whole shape, what I just want to do is actually move these 3 points down. So I'm going to click and drag over the space where those 3 points are. So these two down the bottom here are not selected. I'm going to grab one of them and just start dragging down. And we can see that that just makes it shorter. It just moves the points further down. You can actually use the arrow keys on your keyboard. And what I want to do here is just have a little bit sneaking itself over the top of the X height line. What this is called is an overshoot. And if I deselect and turn off my guides for a minute, and perhaps even turn this to black, what that should do is make it appear to be the same height. If I make it actually the same height, so the top of this curve is the same height as that, this will appear shorter. But you can mess around with your letter forms until you find what works for you. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is create the closed shape. I have this one here and I want to work with this curve. You could always get the circle tool and draw yourself a circle or an oval, but you can see that this doesn't really match the style that I've got happening over here. So I'm going to use this one and turn it into a closed loop. So I've made a copy. I'm just going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to make another copy. So whenever I'm doing this to make a copy, I'm just holding Alt and it lets me make a copy. If I go to the corner there, it gives the little rotate symbol. So start rotating, turning it upside down. I'm going to hold Shift and it will lock it to perfectly vertical. Brilliant. So it's okay to have a little gap here, that's fine. In fact, I might move them further apart so I can see what we're doing. What I need to do is basically bridge this gap and then clean up the points, the extra points which will be created. So I'm going to select the top one using the black arrow tool, and I'm just going to zoom in here. So this is the right side here. So I need to bridge this gap here. Press P to get the pen tool. Hover your cursor over there and it'll give you the little slash symbol. Just click once. Hover over where the other point is. It'll be in the middle there somewhere and it gives you the little link icon. Click there and you have joined this side. So just repeat on the other side. Get the little slash icon, get the little link icon. This is actually giving you the loop icon, which is indicating that it will close the path. So there we go, it is now closed. If I zoom out, might pop this out of the way. We can see that we've got 3 points up the top, 3 points down the bottom, and then 4 points in the middle. So we actually don't need any of these points. I'm going to use, staying with the pen tool, I'm going to just mouse over them to get the minus symbol and delete those 4 off. It shouldn't change the shape because these sides are perfectly vertical. If you don't want perfectly vertical sides, you may want to move those paths around a bit. Okay, so that's working alright. We have a very interesting shape. I quite like to keep some of these interesting shapes. I mean, that could be very useful for a 0 or something. My cat is just yowling. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make this the same height as that. It's going to have that overshoot and I need to line it up. So I need the top of this to be at the top of that, but I don't want to move this one up. I want to move that one down. And I want the computer to do it for me. I'm all about getting the computer to line stuff up. It keeps things more accurate. So I know the top of this is correct, so I will use the top of that. Just drag this one down a bit. Select this one as well. So these two are both selected. And then just align to the top. So now the top of those are both perfectly aligned. Command semicolon, bring the guides back up. And we're going to use the same trick to bring these 3 points here up. And Kat's coming over to help record this video. So I've got the white arrow tool here. I'm going to click across and get all 3 of those points on the bottom. And then just use shift and the up arrow. I'll zoom in here so I can see. So the amount of space that I've got overshooting up the top, I want to kind of replicate that down the bottom. And that's close enough. And that will work for me. I'm just doing this quite quickly, but you can spend quite a lot of time working on your shapes if you'd like. Just going to move these 2 out of the way. Now there's only 3 things left to do. I need to create the dot on the eye, I need to create a crossbeam, and I need to create a diagonal. So I'll do the diagonal first. I'm going to work with the stem. So I'm going to make a copy of that and bring it over here. I'm going to make it a bit longer, so I could just drag it out one way, but I want it to extend past the descender and past the ascender. So instead of doing that, when I drag it up, I hold Alt and it drags from the center outwards. And then I'm going to just rotate it to get my diagonal line. So you're saying, Philippa, that's way too long. What are you doing? You're crazy. Well, I like to make it nice and long. That way I've always got these pieces that I can use later. But for here, I actually want to cut it off. What I'm going to do, remember I've got this shape here, which gives me the exact top and bottom of my X height. I'm going to use that to help me figure out how to cut this diagonal line. For that, I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to draw 2 horizontal lines, just so that they are plain black with no fill. So the bottom one here, I'm going to select that, hold shift and select the eye, and align to the bottom. Same deal with the top one. Select that one, hold shift, select the eye, align to the top. I'm just going to turn off my guides for a second, and I'm going to shuffle these across. I'm holding shift as I drag so I don't move them out of alignment. And I'm going to use these 2 as kind of knives to slice through this diagonal. So selecting all 3 items, I need to get my Pathfinder palette open, and I'm going to use the bottom left tool, which is divide. When you divide something with the Pathfinder tool, it will actually group them together, which I think is a pain, because normally I want to then move stuff around. So you have to ungroup, and then you can delete the pieces you don't want or use them for something else. So that's not really very diagonal looking, but it will give us a very vertical feeling to this typeface. I'm going to make the dot for the eye now. So I'm going to use the eye and drag it up, hold shift, hold alt to make a copy. And we'll just scooch that end up and put it into place. So that gives me the dot for the eye. I can then use the dot for the eye, maybe a bit taller, there we go. I can use that dot again holding shift and alt, and I can drag it across, and I can make a crossbeam for the T. So for this, what I'm going to do is hold shift, select both of those elements, center them, grab the crossbeam, and I want to extend it equally on both sides. So I'm going to start pulling out to the right, hold Alt, and it will pull equally to the left and the right at once. And this can always be altered later. So there we go, the T, the I, kind of the N, the O, and a diagonal. About now I suggest you save your work. And now it's off to actually build some letters out of this. So we've really only got 2 letters done, or maybe the O has got 3 letters done. We need to build some more. I'll close that up. So I like to work across because then I keep my guides and I use the guides to help shape my letter forms. I'm going to duplicate this artboard by grabbing the artboard tool, make sure that the move or copy artwork button is selected. I'm going to start clicking and dragging this artboard, hold down Alt to make a copy and hold down Shift to keep everything nice and level. Great. Just going to move those out of the way. I don't need this one, I'm not using those. I can get rid of, whoops, I can get rid of these. And I'll keep these kind of off to the side there and start building from the left to the right. So letters that I do have, I'll chuck them over here and potentially give them a different colour so I know that they're kind of done. Red, green, dark green maybe. There we go. You can see I'm going to get hung up on choosing colours. Those, we've got the O done. Now this is not basic artwork and neither is this, so to transfer this across to a font editing program such as Glyphs or FontLab or Fontographer, something like that, you will actually need to convert these back to basic artwork. So for the T, it's relatively easy. Just select both parts and then use your Pathfinder tool, which I just closed, and instead of using divide, this time you use unite. And you can see those lines that were just around here have gone, the overlap is gone, it's now one piece, not 2 pieces, so that's basic artwork. For this one here, this is a stroke with a width, so that won't transfer across to a font editing program very well at all. What I need to do is convert this to the outlines. So instead of the line running down the middle with a width on either side, it's more like this with the line running around the outside. So I'm going to go up here to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and now we have one path around the middle and one path around the outside. I'm just going to use the eyedropper tool and slurp up that colour, and now that one's done as well. Okay, so let's start making some of these other letter forms. I'm going to make an H. So for an H, I need this piece here, and I need this piece here. Copy those across. Make sure you're copying, that way you've always got them to go back to. You've got the basic artwork pieces. And zoom in, because a lot of people don't zoom in and they end up trying to work on stuff which is tiny and it hurts your eyes and it gets very inaccurate. You can zoom in quite a way. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is move it in closer. In fact, what I probably want to do is actually convert this from a stroke to a path. So outline the stroke. I'm going to just drop the transparency on both of those. So go to my transparency palette and just pop them down to 50 or 60% or something, and that way we can see exactly how much is overlapping. I can actually select both of them and align them to the left. Turn the guides off. So I've changed the colour to blue, and that gives us a very simple effect. That's quite nice. I don't mind that one too much. It's got a bit of a kink over here, a visual illusion. It seems to go in a bit there, but hey, for a quick put together typeface, that's fine. Often when I'm making these, I like to make a lot of edits on the typeface later. So I do like to make copies where the parts are still editable. I'll just drop that down so I can tell that there are two parts there. And for this one here, I will use my Pathfinder tool to unite the pieces. So there we go, we've got an H, we can do an N as well. We'll use these two pieces. Actually, why bother? We'll use that piece there and this piece here. Select the two pieces, align to bottom, align left. Okay, what's happening? Does it look any good? Yeah, kind of, not really. Something funky is going on up here. So we're maintaining the width in here, which is important. But we don't want this to happen up here. So what I actually need to do is probably reduce the curve so it comes in further down. What I'm going to do there is again pop those back semi-transparent so I can see clearly what I'm doing. I'm going to use the white arrow tool, just select this piece in the middle, and I'm going to bring it to the front just to make sure it's on top. So that's Command Shift right square bracket, and then I want to grab this point and this point, so that's the two on the left, and just shimmy them across just a couple of places, and I want to shorten this as well and potentially even move that one across a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is get more of a cut in here. I don't want to ruin that curve too much. So that looks better. Whoopsie daisy, ungroup that. And I'll unite those ones together. So I've got a copy of the editable pieces down there. So you can see we can very quickly start to build up the letter forms. What's the next letter I could make? I could make a V. Let's see how the diagonal is going to work. We're going to need the other side of the V, obviously. So I will duplicate that. I'll press O, enter. And as long as it's set on, I normally let it set on vertical for left-right flips. You can push enter again. So that's O, enter, enter. Do it again. O, enter, enter. Yep. Lovely. I'm going to drop the opacity down again. So you can decide how sort of pointy this needs to be. It's going to have a flat bottom for this V because we did cut it off flat before. But with zooming in here, I can actually just pull this across. I'm holding shift as I do this. And it's safer to have it sort of slightly too far to the right. If I pull it too far to the left, I'm going to get this kind of kink sitting out here. So it's safer to have a bit more of a gap over there. You can get quite fussy with that. You can zoom in quite a long way and get that more accurate. So the V is very narrow. I'll just turn that to blue, see what it looks like. It does look horrendously narrow compared to these, and there's a huge amount of colour down here. Compared to these are quite open, and this is very, very closed. So what I might do there is actually adjust the width of this. Probably what would be better is to go back a step and actually get a slightly more tilted diagonal. That would work. But if I grab, so this is the, if I change the colour of one of these, and then change the opacity just so I can see what I'm up to. What I want to do is alter the angle of this line to make it get narrower towards the bottom, kind of like reverse bell bottoms. So I'm going to use the white arrow tool, grab that point, and then I'm just going to count the number of clicks over. 1, 2, 3. Select this piece, send it to the back, Command Shift left square bracket, select off, grab the blue one, 1, 2, 3. It's better. It's not great, but it's getting there. So you can use that technique to open up the curve. So this is no longer a parallel line down here. It is wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. But that can work just to open up the shape a little bit. And again, I can unite that one. Both the N and the V can easily be turned into their double counterparts. So if I take the V and move it over here and I make 2 copies, I'm actually going to turn off the artboard line. So I'm going to turn on hide artboards. Grab both of these and knock the transparency down. We can look at making a W. Pretty rough and ready, but that'll do. So I'm just moving these down, making a copy. Grab these, set them back to 100%, unite them. We now have a V and a W. Move that one across there and I'll look at making an M. So I'll start with the N. And then I'll use this piece and discard that bit. So I need to ungroup those, discard that bit there. And pull this in here. Now this time this line here needs to be exactly over that line there. So it is a bit hard to see. There you go. And unite it as well. So I hope this gives you a really good idea into how you can start creating typefaces using modular letterforms. Have a play with this technique. It will give you completely different results depending on the basic shapes that you start with. So I've started with some very standard shapes. You can use this technique, you can add serifs, you can use it for italics as well, and you can use it for more interesting letter shapes. If we look back at the examples, we've got some quite different styles occurring here which could be made this way. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like me to record in the future. And until next time, thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe to this channel. Bye!